Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Dr. Meghan Garcia-Webb has been helping CEOs, attorneys, physicians, and consultants look and feel better for years, and she is attuned to the concerns of high-achieving individuals, as well as the specific mindset traps that befall even the most organized personality. Meghan is board certified in internal medicine, lifestyle medicine, and obesity medicine, bringing her patients the latest evidence based therapies. She is also certified as a life coach through the Life Coach School, their premier choice for physician coaches. Through this unique combination of skills, she has pioneered an innovative hybrid model of customized care, creating lasting results for patients with ease. Dr. Garcia Webb earned her bachelor's at Tufts University and her medical degree from the University of Vermont Medical School. She completed her residency in internal medicine at the University of Massachusetts. In addition to her clinical work, she produces a weekly YouTube series, Weight Medicine with Dr. Meghan. Dr. Meghan Garcia-Webb has also been featured in publications such as Time, GQ, Food and Wine, the New York Post, Men's Health, Newsweek, Prevention, and Parade magazine. That is not a bad list of names right there. Dr. Meghan Garcia-Webb, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It is an honor to host you. I'm so glad that we got in contact with each other. I love your work and how you help people. And you're already going to be holding a record on our podcast. Congratulations. This is amazing. This is going to be the shortest episode ever of Boundless Body Radio. We have a team that does all the research on our guests. I'm just making this up, but we have a team that makes up all our questions. And they
Yeah.
only came up with one for you today. So I only really have one question to ask you. It'll be really easy, and you can just tell everybody the answer. And the question is, how many calories should people eat to lose weight?
Oh my gosh. Well, that's great because I have the exact answer.
Good. Yes. Oh my goodness. We've done like 800 of these and we've never
Right.
cut to the chase. This will be like not only the shortest one, but the last one. We could just be done after this.
Right, you're done. Just
Awesome.
pack it up now.
Yeah, perfect. So what's the number?
I don't have patients count calories. Isn't that funny?
Well, shoot, I think you're going to lose the record. We might have to go in a
Oh,
little bit further depth than today.
maybe.
So I may have to take a little bit more of your time.
I
Um,
know.
obviously joking around, but yeah, it's an interesting problem and one that I've heard you talk about a lot as far as like, we just have everything stacked up against us as far as it, comes to like weight control. And it's interesting how, our perception has kind of shifted around. Like when we used to think that like Homer Simpson was like the fattest person on TV, and that's like more like average if you just like kind of walk around Costco. People have gotten a lot bigger. The problem seems to be getting a lot worse. It's happening to people younger and younger. We've talked to a lot of guests that were, kind of like my age, your age, grow up, and yeah, there might be a few chubby kids, and my parents had to buy me husky clothes, and I didn't really know what that was. But now it's like it's almost more that kids are overweight than not. So it's a really interesting problem. And yeah, I don't know how you can be very optimistic about helping people with this when it seems like everybody just has so much stacked against them.
Yeah, I think there really is, it's a lot of people personalize this issue of weight, and there's a lot of shame and stigma around it. But I think, the deck is really stacked against people. There are forces on so many sides that are really not helping to help people live a healthy lifestyle the way they might if they grew up somewhere completely different.
Yeah, that's a good point. I even think about like, thinking about somebody driving to a fast food restaurant and going into the drive-through, like at the very least, they got in their cars. Like we don't even have to do that anymore. We can just order food all day. I know people who literally eat out every single meal and don't cook hardly anything for themselves at home. It's just so crazy.
Yeah, I think it really is like whatever your standard is really becomes your norm. And so I have so many people who I'll talk to them about like, hey, like cooking a little or just like assembling a meal or, talking about vegetables. And I have patients that say like, oh, that's a lot of work, like eating vegetables. And I think, we have this conversation of like, vegetables are the easiest thing to eat. Like you could do nothing to them really. And same with fruit. Like there's so many natural sources of food that are the foods that we evolved to eat that really don't require a lot of effort, but we are
Yeah,
just in this culture of, but also, whatever you get delivered is going to taste very different,
right.
and it's easy to
Yeah.
get.
Yeah, that is a really good point. I find your career, kind of course very, very interesting. We mentioned in the introduction that you are board certified and triple board certified, especially in obesity medicine. You got your doctorate and are working with patients. And for some reason, you decided that that wasn't enough. And I also find it very curious when we mentioned the coaching in the introduction that you said you're coaching other physicians. So that tells me that something was maybe missing in your training that made you want to go a little bit deeper, because I think we think that the doctors are the ones that know the most. They know the most about nutrition and they know how to help people and they've got plenty of time and resources to be able to do that. Tell us about your journey, why you got into practicing medicine and to begin with, and why you found that that was not sufficient and you needed to go a little bit deeper and change your practice.
Yeah, I think I really did have kind of an alternative journey. I studied at the University of Vermont, which is really big on prevention. But I think the what's hard about medicine is there's so much to learn. And when you're in medical school, they're preparing you for everything. They're preparing you to go into neurosurgery and dermatology. So there's just so much to learn. And there is a lot of preparation about how to talk to patients, how to get a good history, how to be accurate. And so I think it's just really a function of time in terms of how much we can allocate towards nutrition and prevention. And I think all medical schools know that that's really important. But it's like how, and Vermont, of course, of all the places to be, like they are really trying to do the most. But you're just limited by time. So when I finished my residency, and I was at UMass, and you're seeing people who are so sick, really a lot of like end stage illness. And so I really wanted to go into primary care because it's nice to be able to prevent people from getting to that. I think acute care is very exciting and there's a lot of adrenaline, but like it would be nice if people didn't need these really extreme measures to help them when they're in an emergency situation. It would be so great if we could actually do the kind of like slow, boring work and prevent them from getting there. So that's really where my focus was in primary care. And then even in primary care, you're very limited by time, and what, especially in an insurance-based model, like what they will pay for. And there are less primary care doctors out there, so you have more and more patients, and you're trying to do the most with what you have. So, and I've been very lucky because and I still do some primary care now. Where I am is very accommodating, and I think it's very physician friendly, and they really recognize the limitations of this kind of broken healthcare model that we have. So I feel very lucky to be able to work in that, but it's still, um, you're still limited by so many things logistically. And so also when you work in primary care, you are doing like a lot of chronic diseases are due to lifestyle issues. And a lot of those lifestyle issues have to do with weight. And so it just seemed like, gosh, if we could just fix people's weight, it really helps so many things downstream. And I kept having these conversations with people of like, okay, like I gave you all the info, I told you the books to read, like gave you the exercise plan, like how's it going? And then I would just have these same conversations with people of like, well, it's been really hard. I haven't been able to do it. And I didn't want to like have people be discouraged either. So I thought, there's something that's not clicking and it's not about information.
Mm.
And so that's what led me into coaching. And I really felt like that was the secret sauce to really get people from where they were to where they wanted to be.
Yeah, gotcha. It's interesting you mentioned the acute care and the emergency room in particular. And, after doing so many episodes and talking to many people who spend their careers in the emergency room, I was stunned because I think of, the emergency room as these are the car accidents and the gunshot wounds and whatever. And I consistently, anytime I've ever asked somebody across the board who works in the emergency department, they're like, we do deal with acute care, but it's all chronic related. It's like 85 to 90%. If I ask what percentage is like, yeah, it's an acute problem, but it's because of the diabetes. It's because of, the heart disease and the high blood pressure and all these other things. And so even then, in an emergency situation, so much of that is stemming from chronic disease, which, as you said, chronic disease is lifestyle related. There are things you can do to help with that.
Right. And that's what I really like about your show is that you really point out it really is all about autonomy and the choices that you make and the options that are available for you. And I think that's a really important conversation that we have a lot more control than we are led to believe in terms of our own health
I
and what we're
totally
doing.
agree, and thank you for the kind words.
Mhm.
So as you got certified in the life coaching, the school that you went to seems like it's very, very legit. I was doing a little bit of research on that. I can tell you, like the life coaches that I know around me, they're the ones that like most need a life coach. Let me tell you. So I don't know about like what their certifications was. I believe the whole thing is hard to like, kind of certify around or make sure that people are doing it in a legit way. Where you went seems really legit. What did they add to your repertoire that you were really glad that you went out and did that?
Yeah, no, I love where I did the life coach school. I think it was just really terrific training and they take it very seriously. I think they're on hiatus now because the founder, like, she's so successful. Her son is like now becoming a professional golfer. So she's like, hold on, I want to like help him on his journey. But she's still doing training and things. But um it really was helping me see that it's not just about the actions that are helpful for people. It's not just giving them the lists and the books, but it's really about getting so nitty gritty with like, why are you eating at night? Like, and it's different for so many people. Why is it hard for you to put down the bag of chips? And those are conversations that, you definitely they take longer than, the 2 minutes that you might have in a regular like wellness visit for somebody. And it's very personal. And so I think it really gave me the tools to be able to like have that even broach that conversation because a lot of times in medicine we want the patient to feel comfortable, we want them to feel at ease, we want them to tell us things. And I think what life coaching does is it really helps you ask very hard pointed questions, still with the patient's best interest in mind, but it can be a little more confrontational than I think physicians are used to dealing with patients.
Yeah, got it. Okay. And then for somebody who's never done coaching, I was really excited to ask you about what misunderstandings people think they might have with coaching, what they think it might be, and what it actually is. I think a lot of people will think like, okay, she's a life coach, she's going to be telling me what to do. Can you tell us what a coaching session is actually like oftentimes?
Yes, that is such a good question. Yes, so I think what a lot of people think is like, I'm going to meet with the coach, they're going to like come up with a plan for me, and then I'm just going to do it. And that's partly true. Like I always have a plan that I'm working with somebody, but it's really focused on, finding out what the real problem is. So, for example, somebody might have a hard time exercising. And then what we're really looking for is okay, for this person, why they know how to exercise, they know how to go to the gym, they probably have the equipment in there, they're probably staring at it right now, right? So for this person, what is the real mental block? It's all about finding those invisible mental blocks because we all have them. And then really helping them to remove them because we get all these wires that are crossed in our brain all the time and we give ourselves these great reasons to not do things, right? Like my one of my favorite examples is, I'll be asking somebody, why they had planned on going for a walk, but they didn't go for a walk. They're like, well, it's cold. And I'm like, I know that sounds like a great idea in your head, but also like we're in Massachusetts, it's going to be cold, right? Do you not have a coat? Do you not like the reasons that you're giving me, they sound good, but they're not actually, that's where the block is you think that was a legitimate reason. And our brains are always looking for ways to not exercise, right? That's not something like it's such an artificial concept in the span of human history, right? Nobody was exercising 5,000 years ago because that would have been so reckless, right? So it's all about finding these little things and then questioning them and deciding what to keep and deciding what to throw out and kind of learning more about yourself and being on to your own kind of the tricks that we all play on ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. Well, walking is an awesome example. It's one of my absolute favorite activities. And I know it's one of yours as well. And somebody, people might look at us and say, like, oh, well, you guys have a lot of willpower. You can go out there. You don't understand. Like, if I don't walk, I feel terrible. I feel so much better when I get a certain amount of distance or steps or whatever. And yes, I prefer that we're doing it in the summertime here in the Salt Lake Valley and it's beautiful and warm and nice.
Right.
But in the wintertime, like I'm not just gonna not walk. I'm gonna go outside and bundle up, or I'm gonna find a place that has an indoor track, or I wouldn't love to do it on a treadmill, but you can find those because once you start these habits, they're paying you back. Like you feel
Mhm.
really good when you do them.
Right.
It's a little bit uncomfortable when you're starting the habit, but you don't understand how this is going to flip in the future and nobody's going to stop you from walking in the future because you're going to love it.
Right, exactly. And I feel that walking is so important. I walk 6 days a week and I really do it. Part of the reason I do it is just so I can tell my patients, like, yeah, it was a blizzard. I get it. I was there. I walked. Maybe I didn't walk for an hour, but I did have to do other things and it was kind of a pain. But I put on a coat and I put on boots and I left my house and, it can happen. I think there's always a way to work out. I really believe that. Like, no matter what's going on with somebody, so many people are like, well, I couldn't work out because I hurt my ankle. It's like, okay, well, you probably couldn't do like plyometrics, but there's other things you could do. Like, don't let yourself off the hook so easily because there's a part of your brain that's just going to grab those excuses like the first chance you get. So you just have to be onto yourself.
Yeah, no, I love that. I've used this example before, but back in, I don't know, 2011, 2012, when, fitness trackers were just starting to get popular, Fitbit was a big one. At the gym I was working at, we started doing tracking challenges and see who could get the most steps
Mm.
and whatever. And I just thought, like, okay, well, I'll just park at the very farthest parking spot of a store and just I'll get a few extra steps there. Like Costco, doing that at Costco is like a thousand steps or something. Well,
Right.
we don't do those anymore. And that was years ago. And I never really stopped parking in the same places. And you just think about that like accumulated impact of doing that for so many times and so many years. And yeah, that's not like miles and miles and miles every time I parked my car, but that all adds up. And that's extra fresh air and sunshine and less stress that I have to worry about getting the best parking space that takes up even more time anyway.
Right.
Like those
But
things are so easy and like I don't even think about it anymore.
right, you're not on your phone, right? Like these are so many like little wins that, just become a part of your everyday routine. I think
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for telling us a little bit about the coaching practice. I do want to talk to you about what the hell is going on with weight gain, weight loss. In your opinion, as you look back, as much or as little detail as you want to go into here, historically, in your opinion, how do you think we got to this spot? Was there a certain food that we made that was terrible? Global transportation, where we're moving all kinds of foods all over the planet where they wouldn't be accessible? um, what happened? What do you think happened to the point that like north of 88% or 93%, depending on the study you look at, of Americans are not metabolically healthy these days?
Right, right. Oh my gosh. Well, where to start? I mean, we're not farming anymore. So most people don't have a concept of like growing your own vegetables or, we're very disconnected to our food. So all the, industrial progress that we made is great for so many reasons, but it really did disconnect us to our food. And then there was a lot of, I think we also got very sciencey, in the 60s, 70s, 80s in terms of, oh, well, there were all these advances, like we put a man on the moon, like we can freeze dry all these foods and make these amazing technological advances. And isn't this better this way? Like we're so evolved now. And so I think that had a lot to do with it. I think this whole, of course, like the no fat craze didn't help anybody because, and it sounded so good. It's like, well, don't get fat. You just don't eat fat. And like logically, it was so catchy, right? And this push towards like complex carbohydrates and, that didn't help anybody. And then I think there was also this push of, productivity and just go, go, go. And why do you need to just have a meal? Like, can't you be doing five other things while you're eating? I mean, I think that's huge for people. Nobody knows when they're hungry or when they're full, and they think it's perfectly acceptable to do five different things while they're eating, or like be standing up. There's so many. I find people doing the most ridiculous things while they're eating, and they don't even realize that it might like there might be another way, and it might be better for they might enjoy it more than like eating in their car. Um, that's another issue right there. I mean, I feel like I could go on and on. There's the convenience foods, what's in the convenience foods, how easy it is to get the convenience foods. So I think this has just been one big snowball. And it's so interesting to me because, if you've ever talked to anybody who grew up in a different first world country and then came here as an adult, they're like, what are you doing? This is awful. And they really, most of them like either like really have to work hard to not gain weight or just kind of gain weight by default. It's like the freshman 15 when you move here, right? It just happens to people if they're not careful.
Yeah, totally. No, that's a really good point. I will often reflect that the first dietary guidelines ever to be, presented was in 1961 with the American Heart Association, and they were trying specifically to lower fat to help with heart attacks. And we
Mhm.
we go to today, it's still the number one killer of Americans is heart attacks. So it didn't even fix the one problem, and it presented all these other problems. Like if I open up my Formula One history book and flip back to like the 60s, you see the audience. There's not one person that's 1 pound overweight in the entire like group of people that you see spectating a race. And again, now it's just so pervasive. It's just so interesting to think that those recommendations not only didn't help for the one thing that they were supposed to, like it would have been one thing if it's like, okay, we fixed heart disease, but now we've got obesity, so we'll have to figure this one out. It's like, no, it's still heart disease and all these other things running with it and accelerating and coming to exactly what you said. Like we need to start convincing, the population that fat will make you fat. It's a lovely idea. It makes a lot of sense. It just doesn't really seem to work that way. And I want to ask you about genetics, but before I do want to ask you about what you meant when you said in the very beginning. I'm still very disappointed you didn't have a caloric number for us. We have to have this longer discussion and try to figure this out. Um, why is it that you don't have your patients track calories? What
Yeah,
explain the common what everybody knows how to lose weight and it's
right.
eat less and move more, and that's related to calories. The first thing you said is like, I don't give people calorie targets. Like, how are you justified in doing that?
Yeah. So I think, we never do as good a job as nature does. And we all come programmed with a very robust way of sensing our hunger and our fullness. If you've ever seen a 3-year-old child at a birthday party, like they'll eat half a cupcake and toss it aside and then go run around and play. Um, and we really lose touch with that over time. And I think I don't love when people, and this isn't all patients, of course, but I think when we depend on external uh, reasons to stop eating, we are not using what we came programmed with. So, and that's actually why one of the reasons why the GLP-1 medications are so helpful because they really strengthen that message from your stomach to the brain that says, I'm full. And even if people had been counting calories for years, they really find that they don't need to on these medications. And the medications have several different mechanisms, so and that's one of them. But I really like people to learn when they're hungry, learn what the difference is between being stuffed and satisfied. And that's a very, I'm really pushing against the grain there because that requires people to not eat when they're distracted. It requires people to sit down and pay attention to things. It requires them to give themselves enough time. And all of those things I think are so very beneficial. And I also think that when some people just really drive themselves nuts with the calories. And I think diet culture can be very harmful for people. And, so we have the one side of the coin, which is everybody doing the convenience food and overeating and doing the least amount of effort. And then I feel like we have this other end of the spectrum, which is, treating everything like a science project, or we're like a lab specimen. And I think that that's, part of me feels like there's a philosophy there that like being healthy is like a grind and you've got to work. And it's like, well, no wonder people don't want to, if it's this or that, like that one's a lot less fun. So I think there's a way for people to like learn what they like to eat, spend time learning about themselves and what keeps them full. And I think that that is really important, and it's not taught. It's a lot easier to give yourself like a list of calories and just check it off. But I also find that's not so sustainable for people. Now, I do have patients that come in and they're like, I've tracked every calorie for the last 6 months, and they love it. And for those people, I would say, go for it. But a lot of people find it very burdensome and can really get into this like, oh, I had a bad day because because I didn't eat the right thing. And then that all just kind of comes into this shame that's associated with weight. And then it really, and I feel once people get into that kind of shame spiral, then it really makes any sort of effort to help them. So it just makes it that much harder. It's like you had all these other issues and then you add the shame on top of it. And now the problem is just that much bigger.
Yeah, that's very well explained. I love that. And humans, we're not like toasters. We're not like a simple machine where you put a piece of bread in and you get toast, and it doesn't matter what bread you put in. Like tomorrow, you can have more toast. Like it's just a very simple machine. Like my whole career before we started our own business was using metabolic carts to measure how many calories somebody would burn at rest.
Mhm.
And not only could that number fluctuate greatly, we were just making assumptions based on a 20-minute test and
Mhm.
extrapolating it to 24 hours, which you could argue is, I mean, maybe an okay starting point, but even that's not going to be terribly accurate. But your inputs change the outputs. So people that had done way too much cardio and had over dieted for a long time, you cause the metabolic rate to decline. And now it's not burning as many calories. The body's in a mode where it's trying to be very miserly and hold on to
Right.
energy because your body's slowing down, it's cooling down literally. People get cold in their hands and feet. The body wants to
Right.
protect the organs and keep them warm. And the same thing can happen if somebody has over dieted. The best way to get them out of them is to reverse diet them and start to give more and more food back. And yeah, they're going to gain weight in the beginning, but over time the metabolism is then going to start to speed up back to where that person wants again. So the equation is always changing on you. You can count calories, which is completely inaccurate and poor anyway. And like eating a
Mhm.
serving of cereal has never been done in the history of cereal ever. You have no idea how
Mhm.
small an actual serving is.
Right. Right.
But
No
it,
one has
it's
any idea.
it's not a workable, it's not an answerable question. It's not a workable solution. You can't, from so many levels, you can't count calories out of this because it's an equation that's changing on you all the time based on what you're doing.
That is so true. And also like especially just day to day. Like I think it's so interesting. You could serve yourself the same exact amount of food, and if you're really listening to your own natural cues, like one day you'll eat half of it and the next day you might eat the whole thing. And your body has a way of like figuring things out, and that's how it's been working for, thousands of years. But when we reduce it to a number, I think we're ignoring a lot of really good benefits. So yeah,
I
I
agree.
totally agree.
I agree. Well, thank you for bringing that up. I do want to ask you about genetics. I want to say it was what, 2.5 years? That woman from, I believe it was Stanford, came on 60 Minutes and told everybody this is a huge problem. Obesity is a big problem, and it's genetic. There's just not much that people can do about it because it's in their genes, and that's why we have the weight loss drugs and these procedures and kind of invasive kind of things that we can offer to people. Which I do want to cover the GLP-1s with you a little
Yeah.
bit later on in this conversation because my mind has really changed about those as well. I think they can be really helpful for certain people.
Mhm.
So um, when you hear somebody coming onto a big platform like 60 Minutes and saying obesity is genetic, what do you think?
Well, first of all, there are some conditions where we definitely know there are strong, monogenic obesity syndrome. So we're not talking about those. Those are very rare, issues where people have very clear cut deficiencies in the energy regulation pathway. So that's not the majority of people. I think that, genetics is interesting because, again, I always like to look at the rest of the world and they're really doing a lot better than we are, and like it's the same human genome, right? Yes, there are people who genetically might be a little more predisposed to store weight. But and again, to your point about the 1960s, like nothing has changed. The last real change we had genetically was about 10,000 years ago, and some people got the ability to digest milk. And a lot of people are still working on that. So, and certainly nothing's changed since 1960. So, I think across the spectrum of humanity, there certainly are people who are more prone to hold on to weight or more prone to be fast metabolizers. And I always like to think of, the dog world, there's Chihuahuas and there's Saint Bernards and there's German Shepherds, and they all come in different sizes. And there's a lot of diversity across the human genome as well, but not to the extent where, 70% of the US population has either overweight or obesity. I don't think we can say that's genes. I think that's genes that are also being influenced by a culture that is very obesity promoting.
Yeah, got it. Okay. And then as you're working with somebody, at some point you have to talk about the content of the diet, right? You've got to talk about
Mhm.
like what
Yeah.
foods should more be in, what foods should more be out. I don't bel You're pretty diet agnostic, correct? Like you don't assign yourself to any certain particular diet.
Yes. No, no, no. I eat everything. Would I love it if, everybody had completely, 95% unprocessed foods? Yes. But no, I don't. I'm not the diet police. I'm not the food police.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. You're talking to an audience that, for one reason or another, ended up largely in a lower carbohydrate space. Some people are on more stricter, ketogenic diets. I've been on a carnivore diet for over 6 years now. There's a lot of people that are not eating any vegetables at all, and they seem to be doing okay. But generally speaking, what are some of the major like food rules that you think would just help anybody? Like, are you talking about like we need to increase protein, generally speaking? We want to avoid processed foods and sugar. Like, what do you think are the main like
Yeah.
offenders that pretty much, generally
Yeah.
speaking, anybody could benefit from?
Yeah, I think like getting rid of processed food, I mean, and not every once in a while, like yes, it's not going to hurt anybody, but your day-to-day meals I really think should minimize the amount of ultra processed food. The amount of added sugar that is in food is just appalling. I had I was trying to buy kimchi the other day, which is really it's just fermented vegetables, and I had the hardest time finding one that had no sugar in it. And
That's
kimchi is
crazy.
not a sweet food. Yeah, it's crazy. It's not like ketchup where you're like, yeah, there probably will be some sugar, but it's like, why does peanut butter have sugar in it? Why does kimchi have sugar in it? Why does the hummus that I accidentally picked up because I didn't have my regular brand, why did that have sugar in it, right? Like appalling. I think, and I love the work of Michael Pollan. I will just like sing his praises to the rafters, but I think, he has very good common sense advice. And I think his idea of, you know, um, sweet things should be sweet and other things shouldn't. Like I really don't think a lot of this food needs sugar. So that's really important. And yeah, like knowing where your food comes from. So I always think, I love it when people can just add as much fruits and vegetables as they can. I have a lot of patients that eat meat. My I have a lot of patients who don't, and I think it's really kind of knowing your body and what you like. But if you do eat meat, like there's a broad spectrum of quality, right? So you want to know where it's coming from, that you like the source. I mean, these are all really important things too.
Yeah, no, I love that. So okay, what I have found, and again, a lot of our audience has found, fruit is a great example.
Mm.
I will never tell anybody that fruit is an unhealthy thing that they shouldn't have.
Mm. Yeah.
I eat carnivore. I'm not yelling at other plant-based people that they're stupid
Yeah.
and they, I'm
Yeah.
not into that. I don't care.
Yeah.
If I have most fruit, what happens to me is after about 20 or 30 minutes, I start to get very, very hungry. And now I don't want another piece of fruit. Now I want a candy bar or a milkshake or something that is really taking me off my plan. And it's just an increase in cravings, or my anxiety might go up a little bit. It's not like the worst. It doesn't, you know, throw me into, a loop. I don't eat that kind of food anyway, so it's not a big deal. It's
Yeah.
just that like my cravings get really activated and it's uncomfortable. Like I feel very hungry. I want more sugar in a different form. Do you come across that with most people where they're just like you have a little bit of sugar and it activates something a little bit differently in other people, and whether you want to call them a sugar addict, a food addict, or just some people maybe just don't do better with any sugar. Do you come across that very often, or do you find that a lot of people can moderate things like fruit and it's just not that big of a deal?
I don't come across it as much with fruit, although I have every once in a while somebody will tell me. But I think also with fruit, and this is with vegetables too, I always think that, in order for us to feel satisfied, for our stomach to be satisfied, we need to have some fat, fiber, or protein. So if we're having something that doesn't have any of those, it's more likely that somebody's going to feel hungry soon afterwards. So especially if people feel like, oh, when I have fruit, it really makes me hungrier. I would always tell them, like, make sure that you're not having fruit by itself. Have it with fat, or some sort of, you want to get all those things. And some people just need like denser meals. I've come across that too. Like some people just need a little bit more fat and protein to help them feel satisfied. So yeah, I think people are all over the map, but I definitely come across that. I definitely think that the artificial sweeteners, I think they train our brain to always be expecting something sweet.
Agreed.
So, and I have patients who are like, you'll take my Diet Coke out of my cold dead hand before I give that up. And I get it, but I think that, if people are looking for places to maybe train their body to get into a more, a healthier state, always having Diet Coke or sweetening every beverage, we that just kind of asks our body to expect that we should be having something sweet at all times. And so I think that for some people can be very detrimental and can trigger other cravings. Like I have patients who are like, oh, when I have a Diet Coke, then I want something else, even though it's, no calories, but
Right. Yeah, no, that's well said. I don't think people realize how exceedingly, exceedingly rare a sweet taste would have been. It would have been
mm,
very limited in a year, very limited by your location. I mean, even you've taken tropical vacations and you go to amazing places and it's lush, and there's just not like tons of like berries and fruit and stuff growing all over the place. It just would have been very rare and very seasonal. So yeah, when we're around it all the time, it kind of skews that, for sure. And I love the idea of the fat, fiber, protein to help, make people
yeah.
get reacquainted with that satiation feeling. I'll tell people the same thing, like eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full. On that
Yeah.
note, have you found intermittent fasting to be any kind of helpful for some people?
For some people, yeah. I mean, I think I really try to work with somebody's innate preferences because I think that's good because not everybody responds to the same blood pressure medication. Not everybody responds to the same exercise routine. And I think it's the same with eating. So there are some people who are just like not hungry in the morning. And it's a lot of work for them to eat. And they feel bad. So they're like, I should be eating. But it's like, well, you've been this way since you were a child. So maybe you're just not a breakfast person. Maybe you just need to have your food a little bit later. And so I think for those people, it can be really freeing and really helpful. And there is something nice about intermittent fasting when you just have these very clear boundaries that say, like, yeah, we're not counting calories, we're not doing any of that. We're just not going to eat past this certain window. I think for some people that can be very liberating. I think for some people, they're like, it's not good for the people who are like watching the clock and they're like, okay, now I can eat. So I think if people are curious, try it. I have close family members who do it, they love it. It's worked out really well for them. It's like my nightmare, but some people really find that it's helpful for them. And so try it. If you hate it, it's not illegal to stop. So you can go back to having breakfast, but I'm open to it for sure.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. And I like the way that you said, like, some people like having those fences. And like for me, we're recording this on a Monday. That's my favorite way to kind of reset into a week. So I'll eat on Sunday night. I'll fast all day Monday. I just got
Mhm.
off the ice playing an hour and a half hockey game. I didn't even like realize that I'm just not that hungry. This is just what I do
Yeah.
every week. And so for me, it's almost like the decision fatigue is so easy to say, like, Monday I don't eat. Like when I get up in the morning and I train clients, I wear the same clothes every day. I think of it as my uniform. I don't think about what I'm going to wear when I'm training my people. Like, this is what I wear. It's the same thing. Like, if fasting can work with you in that way, just like I don't eat until 11 a.m. Can you bail out
Yeah.
of it? Of course you can. If you're starving at 8 in the morning one day, like, go ahead and eat. But like, if you have those kind of parameters, I think that can be very helpful for people as well. So yeah, that's really well explained.
Yeah, and what I also love about intermittent fasting is that it does help people get more acquainted and comfortable with hunger. Because I think there's also this narrative of like, you have to eat at all times. And if you don't have food in your car, like something bad will happen. It's like, no, nothing bad will happen. If you were starving, you would just pull off to the side and, like, I don't know, get some pistachios in a gas station. Like, you'd be fine.
Totally. Yeah,
Um,
totally. I think it's telling that in the last few years, we've had to invent the word and actually put it in a dictionary that we have the word hangry. And one of
mm,
the best ways I've ever heard it explained by a podcast guest was like, when I used to feel hungry, when I was eating the ultra processed food, when I used to feel hungry, hungry was a bully that would just come in and push me down and punch me in the arm and take my milk money. And I'd have to focus on being hungry at that time, regardless of what I was doing. And as he changed his diet and started to lose weight and burn fat much better, his hunger was now like a nice polite friend that would come in and tap him on the shoulder and be like, "Hey dude, it's noon. Do you want to go to lunch? No, it looks like you're busy. I'll just come back later." And the hunger is so much nicer, and people can, like you said, like get reacquainted with what true hunger really feels like versus like feeling snacky or peckish, and how quickly those calories and arguably the insulin effect of that all day every day can really add up.
yeah, what a great analogy. I love that. That is so true. That
I
is
stole it
well,
from him, so feel
yeah.
free to steal it from me. And
Thank you.
I thought it was a really good one. I use it all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Let's talk about GLP-1. I would love to kind of go back in time to the first few times that you heard about this to begin with.
Mhm.
Maybe what some of your initial thoughts were. Did you think like, wow, this is going to be amazing blockbuster drugs, or wow, this is going to be an absolute disaster? Were you open to using it? Obviously, we've learned a lot over the years, and I think we're
Mm.
using these drugs much better than we were in the beginning. You're not hearing as many horror stories about the side effects, and I think we're getting our dosages a little bit better. But yeah, take us back on our journey of like how you kind of learned about these medications, what they were used for, if they were promising to you, and what you've learned along the way of like how to prescribe them in the best way possible.
Yeah. Well, I think like most physicians and I started primary care really well before semaglutide and tirzepatide were available, but we've had liraglutide actually for quite some time, which is Saxenda. And I think, my initial idea around weight medication was probably similar to a lot of doctors, which is like, well, why are we doing that? Why can't we just help people lose weight in a different way through lifestyle? And we had phentermine, we had Contrave. These are the oral medications. They're okay. They're not gonna, for the rare person, they're extraordinary, but they'll help a little bit. But they certainly don't come near what the GLP-1 medications can do. So that's kind of the history. And I was like, yeah, they're okay, but they're not really going to help tremendously. And why aren't we focused on the root cause anyway? And then I had my medical director was actually obesity medicine certified, and she had been doing it for actually like quite a long time. And she was like, no, listen, like these are really good. And let me tell you why. And that really, I mean, I just think about how much foresight she had to get certified, well before any of this really came out. And she was explaining to me like the things that she could help people with and the effects that they were having. And, she was still using, a lot of the oral medications and Saxenda, which is liraglutide. And so I really thought, you know what, and she's just an amazing physician. And I thought, well, if she's doing this and she's getting these great effects and she likes this, I should give it another thought. And then, so I started learning more about it. And then maybe a couple years after that, Ozempic and really Wegovy had come out as something you could use for weight. And that was about the same time I got Obesity Medicine board certified. And yeah, I mean, the more I learned about it, it's not an all or nothing narrative. It's obesity, people come to it from so many different places. And so, yeah, I would love it if everybody was exercising perfectly and eating perfectly, and then we add the medication. But that's, for some people, it's like that, we're kind of losing time on when they get diabetes. So maybe let's just focus on, what's almost on fire here. So.
Yeah, got it. Okay. And you mentioned the different mechanisms. Can you kind of go over the way the drugs kind of work? That's the way I understand it as well. There's an
Yeah.
effect in the gut itself, and there's an effect in the brain. Obviously, they're somewhat related, but they're different, and it can depend on the dosage as well, which one is more, prominent, and the side effects that come along with that. But can you explain the mechanisms of how they work?
Yes, absolutely. So, the GLP-1 medications work on your GI tract and they slow the movement of food through the stomach. And they can also slow things in the lower GI tract as well, but they really slow how fast your stomach empties. And so that helps your stomach communicate fullness to the brain. Um, so that's one mechanism is you're getting a stronger signal from your stomach to the brain that you're full because the food is there for longer. You're also it also helps affect the energy regulation in the brain in the hypothalamus. So the balance between storing energy and burning energy gets changed so that it becomes a bit easier to lose a certain amount of weight, and that's going to be different for everybody. But it's just kind of like flipping a switch. And these people who have been struggling for so long, it's like, oh, and now the weight is just coming off. Um, and then for some people, it can be very helpful with the emotional component of eating and the cravings and food as a reward. That what we call the hedonic pathway in the brain, that reward circuitry. It can really turn the volume down on that. And that's when you hear people say, oh, my food noise is gone, or like, I didn't realize I had it. Then I took this medication. That's what's getting affected there, we think.
That is the most prominent thing I hear when it sounds like somebody is dosed properly, they're
Hmm.
getting the right drug at the right amount, at the right frequency. That is the statement I've heard the most. Like the food noise I didn't think was there just
Right.
kind of went down. And yeah, that sounds very helpful, even in like the short term. Now, a lot of people are saying that these are lifetime drugs. If you start on them, you're never going to get off of them. I've heard from several people that say like there is a life of these things, like meaning they'll work great for the first year, maybe not so good for the second year. But like one person came on and said like they will not continue working for 100% of people that I treat with these. So I don't know how true that is, but I'm
Mm.
also hearing some doctors say like this is not necessarily a life sentence of taking this all the time. Like we're going to take this maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months. It's a smaller dosage. We're also going to use that to bring that food noise down. And in that time, we're going to coach some other behaviors and make sure that you're doing these other things. And so while we're on this for, again, a limited amount of time, we're going to be really watching your protein intake. We want that to go way up. I'm going to make sure you're doing resistance training. We want that to be a pillar in place. And then you can kind of titrate down the medications, and somebody doesn't necessarily have to be on them all the time. They can avoid the side effects of losing muscle mass we hear a lot about. And if we can fix the habits in the time that the food noise is down, it sounds like people are transferring off of these and they're doing okay. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is a question that I get all the time. I fall more into the camp of, right now at this point in history, let's think of these as a lifetime medication. And that's really because in the research that we have, we can see that when they do double blind placebo controlled trials and they take people off of the medication, the weight does tend to come back on for the majority. There's always going to be those rare people that it doesn't come on for. But the majority of people do gain back at least some of the weight. And then Also, what was I going to say? There's medications that are being developed. I think every pharmaceutical company's goal is to make a medication that you can take like, once a year that will carry you over. And we're clearly not there yet, but for right now, I really do caution patients like, let's think of this as a lifetime thing for now. We're at the very infancy of this branch of medicine. And so who knows what this will look like in 5 years. But I've also seen clinically when people like their insurance stops covering it, or their insurance formulary changes, or I see it in real time, like somebody got cut off, and then they gain the weight back, and it is hard for people. So um I don't really, and I definitely have patients who are like, well, maybe in a year, can we try it? And I don't love that because, the medications are very dose dependent. But I do think that it is such a brand new field of medicine that even though we're thinking that it's a lifelong medication for now, who knows where we'll be in 5 years or 10 years. So it probably won't be, but I just can't predict the future.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's really well explained. Has your dosing strategy changed as you've learned more about these medications? I'm hearing a little bit more about like microdosing, taking a much smaller dose, maybe twice a week or 3 times a week to help control some of the side effects. I'm not sure if that's a thing or not. Like, have you changed the way you are kind of prescribing these, or is it pretty much what is indicated?
I usually go by, the regular dosing guidelines, and usually what I see is medications are dose dependent. So if I want somebody to be able to get that 20% total body weight on Zepbound, usually that involves going up to the highest dose or close to the highest dose. But everybody's different, and there are those people who every once in a while they lose all the weight on the lowest dose, so I would never increase their dose. So it depends on the patient. um, I think a lot of the kind of split dosing, you can't really, I think there's a time and a place for split dosing in theory. Like if somebody was having a lot of side effects and they couldn't get up to a higher dose, maybe if you gave them two smaller doses in a week to kind of over a couple of weeks to help their body get used to it, I could see there being a role with that. But that really, you can't really do that with the current, pens that are available. Like the pharmaceutical companies have thought of this, right? So a lot of that is with the compounded medications, and I just don't, that's not something that I usually do for people. And, on my channel, people tell me every single day how much they love their compounded medications. And I'm like, hey, it's a free country and it's legal. But, so just buyer beware, some people really love them. I don't prescribe them, but I understand why people take them for sure.
Got it. Okay. And then on the procedure side of things, is there any kind of like procedure you'll lean to? We talk about the different types of like, stomach removal, or you hear about sometimes intestine removal, or the bands, or whatever they're
Yeah.
using. Is that something you also kind of like will use in certain situations, or do you try to avoid that as much as possible?
Well, I think it's always nice if people don't need surgery, but I think there's also I think for people who have a BMI of, 40, 45, 50, you might not be able, I might not be able to get them to a BMI that's still within where we feel like is their healthy goal. And so I think the surgery, like the gastric sleeve, which doesn't involve anything with the intestines, is just really cutting part of the stomach out. It's just still like a drastic measure, right? But it is a tool that we have now that can be very helpful. There's also the Roux-en-Y, which is the traditional gastric bypass. Um, these are actually, I think people have these images in their head of them being like very prolonged crazy surgeries, but they're an hour, 2 hours, and they're pretty, I'm not going to say routine, but they're in terms of like surgical complexity, like a lot of surgeons will say like, well, it's, the mortality is less than getting your gallbladder out. So I think we've made incredible advances. I think there's some really interesting endoscopic advances too. Like a lot of GI doctors now are seeing if they can do the sleeve, from the inside out, which really minimizes, you're not going really into the abdominal cavity from the outside. So I think there's really exciting things that are coming from that. So I always like to avoid a procedure if I can, but I also want to be realistic in what's going to help the patient the most.
Got it. Okay. On the coaching side of things, I wanted to kind of close our conversation with this. Like, I can guarantee you 100% of the people you see, they don't see you for the first time and you say, hey, we need to get you losing weight. And they're like, oh my God, really? Like, I had no idea.
Right.
You're kidding me.
Right.
Let's do it. Great. These people are well aware that they need to
Right.
lose weight. Their health is suffering. They have tried stuff, whether they did the cabbage soup diet or the South Beach diet or all the diets, which they probably have. They've
Mhm.
done this. They joined the gym. They spent the money and got the meal plans and didn't make a single meal. They hired trainers like myself and gave them elaborate, way too complicated plans that didn't work and they failed and they blame themselves. And these
Yeah.
people are already feeling pretty terrible. They're not feeling great about themselves. You're not telling them anything they don't already know.
Yeah.
How are you able to help somebody who feels helpless, hopeless? How are you able to help somebody feel like this is not this is happening to you? And yes, there's things that you do, but you're set up in a system that's designed to make you fail. It's really, really challenging. How do you help people have hope and maybe adjust their expectations about what goals should be to help them feel like you are successful, we can do this, let's take a step. After you take a step, we can take another step. Like how do you help people with that? Because that's a huge challenge.
Yeah, that it really is. And the first step is really just letting people know that, like, yeah, this is not a new problem to you. This is not novel. Like, most people in America are struggling with this. So you don't need to internalize it, but we do need to give you a way to push back against these forces that are not acting in your best interest, because it's just the default is unhealthy in America. So I like to depersonalize it. And then I always like to, and a lot of it is focusing on the particular mindset traps that people are falling into, whether that's, getting them out of a shame mindset, whether it's getting them out of like really a lot of it is restoring someone's autonomy of like, yeah, you could definitely do, like, there's a lot of people just kind of forget, or they've been conditioned to think that, well, I'm not going to lose weight, or it's not going to work for me. It works for other people, right? And I also like to think about, well, what are the things that are completely under your control? Like, we might not be able, and I don't like to focus on the scale so much. Like, it's helpful, but it's just one metric. And I also like to think, okay, there's a scale, but also, like, you can set a goal of exercising X amount of times per week. That's completely under your control. And so now we just need to find out why the reasons are that you're not doing that. But, there's actually no physical barrier for that happening. So that's really focusing on giving the patient, the client, their autonomy and showing them that it's really completely under their control, and also that it's better. I always like to, like, gradually let people know that you being healthier is so win-win. It's not a grind. It can be so much better than you think it can be. Like, you're going to be healthier and you're going to like your life so much more.
Yeah, I love that. What a great answer. I think doing those, kind of stoicism practices of like the dichotomy of control is a little bit horrifying in the beginning when you realize how
Right.
few things you actually truly have control over. But then it helps shift your focus to like, yeah, I don't control the weight on the scale. My body's going to do whatever it's going to do. I can't say I want to be the, same weight I was in high school. May or may not ever happen, but you can have the habit. You can start really small, something that's almost like laughably easy. You'll
Mhm.
accomplish that. You'll feel really good, like you said. You'll want to take another step, and then the other things will take care of themselves wherever they do. So, I absolutely love that, and I think that's a great way to end this conversation, Dr. Megan. This has been a lot of fun, very informative, and I think very empowering and inspiring as well. I think a lot of people out there again feel like they're getting beat up. They don't really have a lot of hope, and this conversation I think will do a lot to really help them. So yeah, where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm on YouTube. If you go to Weight Medicine with Dr. Megan, I put out lots of videos all the time. You can leave me comments, questions, all the things. And then I do, if you're in Massachusetts, I can work with you medically and as a life coach. If you're outside of Massachusetts, I work with people around the world as a life coach to help them with the non-medical aspects of their weight loss, which is really so many different things. And my website is www.weightmediциnemd.com.
Perfect. We will link all of that in the show notes to make it easier for the listeners. And yeah, like I said, Dr. Meghan, this has been an awesome conversation. I really appreciate your perspective, being able to stay open to lots of different options and different ways to work with people and really individualizing things, all while staying true to the principles of what can really help people get healthy and to lose weight. So thank you so very much for taking the time to be on our show today. It was a joy to interview you. We really, really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I loved being here. You have such great questions, and I just love that you're focusing on, really pushing the boundaries of what can we do to keep people healthy. It's such important work.
Well, thank you again for the kind words. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks for taking time to be on our show.
Take care. Thank you.
And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.